Hello, welcome back to the channel. I've got an exciting video for you today. Today I am going to talk about 4 decks I think you should try with Tarkir Dragonstorm and 1 maybe you shouldn't. So these are some deck lists that I think are pretty interesting with some of the new cards. And then one deck list that I really like, but I'm unconvinced if it's any good or not. So I want to quickly, before I get into the deck list, talk about my philosophy when it comes to new cards and testing new cards. Canadian Highlander is a bit of a weird format because testing new cards is a little bit cumbersome. It's a 100-card singleton format. You are not guaranteed to draw the card. You could play 10 games and not see a new card. So I tend to just leave them in my deck until I do draw them, or you can try and like spot check for the new cards. Like if you find yourself thinking, oh, I would be really happy if I drew XYZ card right now, then that's probably a good sign that you should keep it in your deck. That being said, these lists that I'm going to show have a lot of new cards in them, and in practice, probably some of them wouldn't stick around in these deck lists, even if these decks prove to be effective. But I thought it was worth at least mentioning that you are going to see a lot of new cards, even if we're not 100% convinced that they're going to be good or not. The other thing is, you're probably going to hear Champion. Who knows? He might even come up on the desk. But nothing to be said, nothing to be done about that. He is, yeah, he is inevitable. So let's get into it right away with Rug Midrange. So obviously there's a couple of pretty interesting things that I think would be pulling you to play Rug Midrange from the new set. First is Songcrafter Mage. This, I think, is pure power level, maybe the best card from Tarkir Dragonstorm. Obviously very strong, basically like Snapcaster Mage and even slightly better depending on what it is you are trying to cast with Flashback or Harmonize, as the case may be. So I've got that one in here. I'm playing it in a Time Walk shell, and I've got a couple of cards that are like kind of interesting. One thing that I'm not doing, and maybe this is wrong, is that I don't have, say, like a card like Mystic Confluence in this deck, which is especially good with Songcrafter Mage. And now that I'm looking at it right now, I think I probably would include that one. At the time when I was building, it didn't cross my mind, but I think I am going to put that one in before I actually run this one through a playtest. The other new cards I've got in here are both of the Eshkis, both of the Temur Legends. So both of these cards are kind of interesting. I think Eshki Dragonclaw is the more powerful of the two. Just 4 mana, and having Ward is pretty big. I've got a decent number of like cheap cantrips and stuff that, or removal spells that you can cast on the same turn with a creature in the hopes of triggering it. I think if this triggers like once, you're pretty happy, and if it triggers twice, I think that you're probably winning the game. So I don't know, maybe it's not going to be good enough, but I wanted to give it a shot. Other cards that are in this deck that I haven't gotten a chance to play because we really haven't gotten to play a lot of Rug decks recently. There hasn't been that much reason to do so. I've got Loot the Pathfinder in from Aether Drift. This card, all the text on this card is really good. Now, the question is 5 mana too expensive? Very likely it is, but I haven't gotten a chance to test it yet, so I'm putting it in this deck. The other card that other 2 cards from Tarkir Dragonstorm that are in here are Ureni as a natural order target. I think this one is going to be really good, and I'm excited to test out this kind of like secondary fair natural order target. So that one seems pretty sweet. And Temur Battlecrier. This is actually a card that I missed in my initial pass of the set, but typically these kind of cost reduction effects are not printed on such efficient bodies. Like obviously the 3 toughness on this card is a little mopey. It's not great into like Lightning Bolt and Galvanic Discharge, but into most other things, this is dying to the same things that most other cost reducers would die to. And having 4 power is pretty good. There are other 4 power creatures in this deck as well, so you can occasionally like live the dream and have additional cost reduction on top of that. You are not really cost reducing anything like super degenerate, but even just getting to, you know, have access to 1 mana leak or 1 mana remand is a decent place to start. And I think that that's going to be an interesting one to test at least. Again, not a lot of opportunities to play Rug deck, so I wanted to get it in there. And then the other cards that I'm playing that are kind of pet cards are Savage Knuckleblade, and unfortunately Storm Force of Nature is not available on Magic Online, so I won't be able to play this one there if I play this deck against one of the guys. But this is a card that I have wanted to put in a deck for a long time. Again, not certain it's any good, not certain this is even the right shell for it, but when playing Rug, you kind of want to try and get all of the Rug cards into your deck that you haven't gotten a chance to play otherwise. Besides that, tying the whole room together, we've got a light counterspell and cantrip suite. I'm trying out Auroral Procession as just like another way to get back Time Walk, which seems pretty good. And just generally, I think this card is pretty powerful. Pitches to Force of Wills, which is good. And then I've also got this Frostcliff Siege. The Teamer mode for Trample and Haste feels pretty attractive in this deck, and the Jeskai mode also seems like it might be decent in like a grindier game where maybe you're stuck on a board that has, 2 or 3 elves that aren't really doing anything. Well, all of a sudden, if any of them hit, they draw you a card that you can potentially trade those cards in for more resources. Yeah, this is deck number 1. It's not perfect. Many of these lists aren't going to be. Like I said, this is kind of just some initial brewing. I've got some other kind of cool callouts here. Smirking Spelljacker is a card that you see in Civic's Law sometimes that I'm excited to see how it plays. Abhorrent Oculus is a card that's in here for power level reasons, although in practice I'm not certain it's going to be castable. That's another one that might get the cut as the deck actually gets played. But yeah, this deck looks sweet. I could see it moving towards having more instants and sorceries, potentially leading into some of these like cost reducing effect a little bit more potentially. But in general, I'm just trying to fill this deck with like cards that are not embarrassing when you draw them, and some sweeter, higher impact ones, which, blue-green has always had, and now red, blue, green, like Rug is getting as well. This deck's points are Time Walk, Natural Order, Mystical Tutor, Mana Drain, and Minskimbu. One of the big issues I think that Rug has especially is like the fact that you get charged a point to play your best Planeswalker, and like I'm not even including Ren and 6 in this deck because I just don't think that card is on the same level as like any of the blue 1-pointers basically. So yeah, so that's the points. Pretty sweet one. I'm interested to try it out. This is one that I would put in the list of like, I think you should try this one. I think this looks like it's potentially pretty powerful, doing some interesting things, and I quite like it. Next, we have Abzan Hatebears. This should not come as a massive surprise. Obviously, Clarion Conqueror is the big signpost card from this set that kind of screams playing Hatebears. The other one that I have from the new set here is Severance Priest, a card that I'm pretty high on. I know not everyone is, but I think this one looks quite good. You basically get to trade 2 for 1 all the time because it has Death Touch. It's basically always trading in combat. You do give them an XX, but in practice, I don't think that's often going to be very big. Like it's maybe going to be 2/2, 3/3, something like that. And this deck should not be dying to a vanilla 3/3 on average. Other new cards in this deck, I've got Sage of the Skies. This deck is playing triple Mox, so you have some turn 2s where you can potentially get the double Sage going, or if you lead on, say, like an Elf, you could maybe turn 3 play 1-drop spell plus this to have 2 of them, which seems pretty good. Other than that, this is mostly, the same kind of Abzan Hatebear shell that you have come to know and expect, or maybe you're learning about it now for the first time, but it's sort of like, a Mox aggro deck. It's got some elves. You're playing all the best black-white Hatebears, as well as some of the green ones. And then you are looking to tie the whole room together with like some equipment, a little bit of top end with things like Break Glass Gear Hulk. You're basically slowing the game down if your opponent is a combo player, and then against the more fair decks, you're hoping that you can win the game with emblems and flyers and things like that. Oh, Voice of Victory is another card that I'm trying out. Unclear exactly how good this one's going to be. In the mid-range mirrors, I think there's a lot of value in knowing that your spells are going to resolve and knowing that your things can't get killed at instant speed. It affects combat math in a big way, so I'm intrigued to see how that card plays out. This deck has Skull Clamp in it as well, so you can like clamp up the mobilized tokens afterwards, which is, I think, a pretty enticing play pattern. But yeah, all things considered, I'm again similarly excited about this deck. I think that it looks pretty good. There's nothing like super absurd. I basically just asked Trent what he was playing and made some small alterations to that. So this is pretty close to what Trent has been playing recently. And yeah, I mean, it's mostly just a bunch of good green, black, and white cards and some pretty egregious Hatebears. I think Clarion Conqueror is going to splash hate your own deck some amount of the time, which is not nothing. But I think it'll also be interesting to test out how much splash hate there is, because obviously, like, we are a green deck, we have Mana Dorks and you know, like a Stoneforge Mystic, etc. And I'm curious to find out, am I going to feel like this is too painful? Because if that's the case, then maybe you have to look at playing Clarion Conqueror in more of like just a straight black-white, or maybe like a Mardu shell instead of this Abzan shell. But yeah, so that's Abzan Hatebears. A little bit of a quicker review on that one. Next, I have another Abzan deck. This is kind of a 2-for-1 special. This is Abzan Hardened Scale. So the other thing that we got in this, in Tarkir Dragonstorm, is the new mechanic Endure, and Endure is pretty sick with Hardened Scale's effects. So this mechanic says, basically, like, when something endures, it endures X, so like endure 2 in the case of this Anafenza. And what that means is you can either put 2 counters on the creature that endured, or you can create a 2/2, or if it was endure 1, you could create a 1/1 token. So this pairs pretty nicely along with Hardened Scale's effects. You're just getting bonus counters on top of that, which is pretty sweet. So I decided to take the green-white counters deck that Trent played in one of our deck challenge videos and kind of update it with some of the new cards, and also just generally kind of updating some of the things in the deck. New cards in the deck are Anafenza, which seems quite powerful. This card just generally seems really good to me, and especially in this decks like this that are going to be doing like a lot of combat, you can do something like make an attack when your opponent sets up blocks that are like kind of okay for them potentially. You get to flash this in and either make like a very large first striking threat, or you can rebuild your board with some 2/2s. Both seem pretty reasonable. I've also got Fellothar, Dawn of the Abzan, and I apologize for the art. This one might be a little harder to read. This one, it says, when it enters or attacks, you sacrifice another non-land permanent and put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. I don't have to tell you why that's really good in this kind of shell. It's, I think, potentially pretty backbreaking. And it's worth noting, too, that like having this kind of this sack effect that's relatively cheap and doing something you want to do anyway is nice when you have something like Market Back Walker or Hanger Back Walker, where you potentially sometimes want to crack these things open for their death triggers. Not nothing as well. Other new cards in the deck include Warden of the Grove. So this is a pretty sweet one that puts a counter on itself at the end of every end step. So again, with Hardened Scale's effect, this is going to grow really fast. And then when another creature enters, it endures. And you can see how this could, generate pretty big boards. The changes that I had made to this deck to try and tune it up a little bit more is I leaned more into the black than Trent was originally. He only had Winding Constrictor in his version of the deck. Obviously, there were constraints. There was a recipe challenge he was following. His deck also had 8 basic lands and like 7 planeswalkers, which obviously we don't need to do here. So I included kind of the 3 best discard spells. I upped the amount of removal slightly. And I also included a new card from Tarkir Dragonstorm, Hollowmurk Siege. This one you're playing honestly for either mode, potentially. If you're in a really grindy matchup, then the Sultai mode might be kind of good. You have a bunch of creatures in this deck that just circumstantially put counters on themselves when they enter, even, so that all of a sudden these are all like Llanowar Visionary or Elvish Visionary effects. They draw a card on ETB, or you can choose the Abzan mode to really start cracking in. You potentially get to start putting like 1 to 2 counters on a creature every turn, and giving Menace makes the blocking really challenging for your opponent. This one I think is probably still a few cards away, but definitely the improvements this deck received from Tarkir Dragonstorm put it way further into the realm of playable than it was before, I think. I think the one thing that this deck is still struggling with a little bit is the fact that you are a little bit reliant on your synergy, and it's hard to be especially interactive. You are really trying to race. I think against the other mid-range decks, this is a decent place to be right now, because you're just doing something that's like quite linear and powerful. And the linear and powerful thing you do, it used to be really disruptible, because if they took out, your one Hardened Scales or your one other thing that cared about counters, then you were in trouble. But now there's so many effects that use and leverage +1/+1 counters that I think you can actually fight into those matchups pretty well. But against combo, you're going to struggle, and there's just no real good way around it currently. I did consider trying to create a hybrid of this deck and the Hatebears deck, and I very well might still try and do that. I could see kind of trimming back half of the counters package. Maybe we don't go quite as crazy and play like Faithful Watchdog, right? Like this is the card that you're really in on the fact that +1/+1 counters are good in your deck. And maybe you reduce those numbers down a little bit and you put some Hatebears in to try and be a little bit more resilient. But I think if you did that, you would be sacrificing percentage points against the rest of the field, in particular against the mid-range decks. So I'm not even convinced that that's necessarily right. But yeah, so this is Abzan Hatebears, or Abzan Hardened Scale, sorry, another sweet one for sure. Next, we have Jeskai Big Prowess, and I say Big Prowess just because we are playing some more expensive cards. So this is taking the kind of typical Prowess shell and scaling it up a little bit. So some of the new cards in this deck, there's actually quite a large number. We've got Flamehold Grappler, we've got Elsha Threefold Master, we've got Narset Jeskai Waymaster, we've got Shiko and Narset Unified, and I think I'm even playing just actual factual Shiko. Yeah, and I'm also playing Shiko Dragon of the Way, which lets you just cast a card from your graveyard for free. Possible this deck wants to play the Sage of the Skies, the 3-mana 2/3 that gets an extra copy when you play it when you've played another spell. That one could get in here too, but I don't have it in here currently. So Jeskai gets you access to some pretty exciting effects in the Prowess shell. One of them being Leonin Lightscribe. This one just buffs everything when you cast a spell, which is like very powerful. And previously, I think the juice was not worth the squeeze on playing white cards. Like you kind of got exactly these two, Monastery Mentor and Leonin Lightscribe, plus some improved removal. But there wasn't a big reason to be Jeskai. And it's definitely getting better and better. One other card that I considered and ultimately cut was Jeskai Ascension, which is the other reason that you used to have to be white. Jeskai Ascension, I think, is a sweet one, but the 3 mana was a little bit too expensive, and I couldn't justify it. Other new cards in this deck, Voice of Victory again. I think this is a deck where if you get to play this and then untap and know that you just get to jam, I think that's a very powerful place to be in a deck like Prowess. This deck is playing Rally the Monastery, so this costs 2 less if you cast something else. So you can potentially go like, play a removal spell, play a cantrip, and then make 2 1/1s with Prowess or what have you. There's other effects obviously that you can play as well. Worth noting, I'm playing Time Walk in this deck as well. I think that you could play Double Mox instead if you were so inclined. I was intrigued by the notion of playing Time Walk because this deck is very good at making tokens, and so I was kind of looking at leveraging something where you have a big turn where you go like spell, Time Walk, make like 4 or 5 tokens with something like Third Path Iconoclast or Young Pyromancer, or in the dream scenario you get to like untap with Elsha and hit them with it. I think this is unlikely to happen super regularly, but worth trying. And then you Time Walk and you maybe get to end the game on the next turn. Unsure whether that's better, but I'm intrigued to find out. And then besides that, we've got kind of typical like blue-red spells. I've got like Lava Dart in here as kind of like an interesting concession to wanting to cast a lot of spells. We've got Lava Dart, Monstrous Rage, obviously standard all-star. It's the only pump spell in the deck currently, although I could definitely see playing more. I have Mutagenic Growth, obviously. And then as well as these cards, I'm playing Underworld Breach as kind of like a fair finisher. I'm sort of envisioning scenarios where maybe on 4 or 5 mana, because my deck has 36 lands and a bunch of cantrips in it, so I'm expecting to be on 4 or 5 mana a decent amount of the time. I'm sort of envisioning scenarios where you're in like a longer, grindy game and you get to like top deck an Underworld Breach and just go Breach, Lightning Bolt, or maybe on 6 lands you go like Breach Double Price or Breach Time Walk, like something powerful like this, or even just Breach, play a creature, play a Time Walk out of the bin. I'm kind of interested in exploring this kind of like more like fair Breach angle, and so I included in this list. So the points here are Mystical Tutor, Time Walk, and Underworld Breach. Like I said, you could play a much different spread where you play like a couple of Moxes and a small blue points spread instead, but I'm you know, trying to be experimental, and this was where I landed for the experiment. Cards I'm particularly excited to test is Elsha. Again, this is one 3-mana 1/1. Sounds like it should be unplayable, and it probably is. I mean, if we're being totally honest with ourselves, I can't imagine a 3-mana 1/1 being like totally incredible. But what if? You know, what if you get to untap with this and you attack and you mutagenic growth it and you make a bunch of 1/1s with prowess? Like that is going to be obviously very powerful. So I'm interested to try it. I also considered brewing 4-color no black prowess. That would be way more in on pump effects and pump spells, and like double strike effects, things like that, like almost Naya Splash Blue. And I might still brew that deck, but this is where I landed for now. This is a bit closer to a more established blue-red prowess shell. So yeah, I think this one looks interesting. Oh, the other new card, I only added this recently. So Corey Steelcutter, this is a card that I, again, kind of missed in my initial pass, and then I was watching people play it in Modern, and talk about playing it in Modern, and I thought, oh, actually, maybe this card is better than I have given it credit for. So it gives a creature 1/1, trample haste, and then it says, when you cast your second spell each turn, make a 1/1 with prowess and give it this spell, or give it this equipment. So basically what this card is doing is it's generating tokens, and also it's not nothing that this can give trample and haste to, like, you know, a big crackling drake or like a big enigma drake out of nowhere if you're in like a really long grindy game. Like, I do think that is relevant text to think about. So I'm interested to see how that will play out. This deck is obviously playing like a bunch of ones, a lot of cheap spells, a lot of ways to cast a second spell each turn, and I kind of think this one might be good enough. If you top deck it late, you're going to be unhappy, obviously, but hopefully I won't. I don't know. We'll just have to test and see. I'm not certain about the mana base for this deck. You will notice there's price of progress in this deck. So I have 7 basics in like the pursuit of not pricing myself for 10. Although if you like price yourself for 10 and them for 10, you're probably winning the game in this deck. So maybe that's fine. Yeah, price yourself for 10 might be like the name of my autobiography, to be honest, though. I have no fear of such plays. I've played Price of Progress in decks with like fewer basics than 7, and I think this is a shell where it looks fine as well. So yeah, this is Jeskai Prowess. Molten Duplication, another card that I'm kind of intrigued to try out. Haven't played it in a Prowess shell yet myself, and I do think that it's potentially pretty interesting. It's not good with all the legends in this deck, but it is very good with all the non-legends. Especially something like Leonin Lightscribe, like you get to copy a Leonin Lightscribe, cast 2 more spells, and like then you're really, I think, off to the races. Yeah, so that's all I've got for this one. The astute among you will be saying, okay, well, these are the 4 decks you recommend playing, and I've just realized I actually think this video is 5 decks that I would recommend playing and 1 that I would maybe not. And the reason for that, spoilers, this is deck number 5 that I would recommend you try and play, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. This is Paradox Academy. I changed the Ugin. This is the only difference in this deck list, but I think it's worth trying. Obviously, the other Ugin is quite good at removing problematic hate pieces, and it sits around as a threat to win the game on its own. I think this Ugin does the same thing. I think this Ugin might do it better. This Ugin has a cast trigger, which is pretty huge, so you can just jam it without really worrying about whether it resolves or not if you really need to remove some problematic colored permanent. And yeah, I think you should try playing this deck, probably, if you like playing Paradox Academy and you had Ugin in your deck before or something similar. I would put this one in instead. I think that, yeah, this card looks extremely powerful. You look at like how many colorless spells are in this deck, how often it's going to trigger. It just seems like it's gotta be a slam. But I don't have any new insights for you into Paradox Academy. This is our Winter Power Rankings Paradox Academy deck with the Ugin swapped. That's all. So a bit of a cop out for deck number 5. It's why I forgot about it in the initial review. Okay, one list that maybe you shouldn't play. I'm not certain about this Stormscale Scion art, but it's the one that added when I added it. So this is Black Red Storm. I am basically playing a Storm deck that is looking to try and jam on like turn 2 or turn 3 at the very latest. So your ideal play pattern is like turn 1, you either set up some mana with like Strike It Rich, Wild Cantor, something like that. Maybe you cast a ritual and you like ritual out a Ral Monsoon Mage or a Ruby Medallion. Maybe if you're really dreamy, you get to get Primal Amulet in there, but I think that one's hard to play on turn 1. So you're doing that on turn 1, and then on maybe as early as turn 2, you're just slamming a bunch of rituals, hoping to like cast a couple rituals, cast a draw 7, and then one of the things that Stormscale Scion does is it lets you go for wins with low storm counts. Like if you cast this card Storm 4, that's a lot of power, and like obviously some decks can answer it, but like just making 4 7/7s is probably going to win the game. Maybe some decks are going to be able to kill all 4 of them. I don't think it's super easy by any means. And then in terms of other things that are going on, the other kind of like quote unquote small storm finisher is Empty the Warrens. This is doing a comparable thing. Basically, like Empty is worse than Stormscale Scion basically all the time, but sometimes you're not going to draw the Stormscale Scion, and sometimes you're going to have only 4 mana. Elemental Eruption is another one. It is interesting that this also makes dragons, so if in some magical Christmas land you like storm off, get to play this for 3 or 4, and then on the next turn can somehow put Stormscale Scion on the stack, you are going to power up the Elemental Eruption elementals, not nothing. And yeah, so other than that, this is a Underworld Breach deck. I've got Lion's Eye Diamond, and I did include Brain Freeze as the 1 blue card. There's like 2 lands that can cast it, plus some of the Moxes. I just think you should have outs to win with the Underworld Breach Infinite if you can. My points are Breach, DT, Mana Vault, Mox Ruby, kind of an odd point spread. But I wanted to just have access to like quite a lot of fast mana. Other new cards in this deck include Will of the Jeskai. This is like a hybrid Wheel of Fortune and also a Past in Flame, which I think is a pretty decent effect. Other cards that I'm intrigued to try are Ironcrag Feat. This is here mostly because if you can like get up to 4, then cast this and put Stormscale on the stack, I think you're pretty happy. And it's also a way where if you like have the Stormscale in hand and you can like Beseech the Mirror, this is a way to go from 4 to 7 to be able to play the Stormscale, which I think is not nothing. I've got Orcish Bowmasters in here, both as a way to potentially try and fight over some Hatebears a little bit, and then also because there are so many draw 7s in this deck, I thought it would be nice to have an out to have the draw 7s be a win condition on their own. And then you've got Tendrils of Agony because sometimes you are just going to be able to like fully do it and get them. And then you've got Grape Shot as well for when you really, really go off. Grape Shot, I think is maybe a little bit ambitious. And I did, when I very, very first put this deck together, I did have Ignite Memories in this deck, and I also had Mind's Desire in this deck, and I had Ave Progenitor Ooze in this deck. I just had all the like Storm threats that maybe win the game with Storm 5 or 6, and Ave was just not castable. It's just worse than Stormscale Scion, unfortunately. And yeah, I ultimately just decided that Mind's Desire was going to put too many constraints on the mana base, and I wanted to just be straight red-black. One other thing you get for being straight red-black, I have Blood Moon, and I have Magus in my deck. And the Magus might get cut. I think the Blood Moon is nice to have just as kind of an out. I'm a little bit low on swamps to be playing these Blood Moon effects, but most of my deck is red, and then I also have like these artifacts that are going to produce black mana if I need to, so that we can operate under a Blood Moon like pretty comfortably most games, and especially if we know that we're going to be doing some amount of mooning, we can work our way towards not having it affect us quite so negatively. This deck looks really sweet. I don't know if I would advocate for you to take this to a tournament, but I'm planning on definitely taking it into some games, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it plays. I think you could also play like a mono red, like Ruby Storm version of this deck with like bonus round and like I think there are other like the fork effects, like ways to copy spells, and then you've got like the red like Cathartic Reunion, um, cards like that where you have to discard as part of the cost, and copying those is really good. The only one of those effects I've included is Dual Strike, and the reason I included this one and none of the other ones is that I don't hate that you can just like on turn 2 foretell this, if you're playing against say like a blue deck for example. You can just put something on the stack that uses your mana without needing to necessarily like commit to something that they can counter. I think that that's a potent thing to have access to, especially when you're trying to set up turns where you're maybe going to go like discard spell into some other stuff. I think it's nice to be able to invest ahead of time, and it only costs 2 otherwise, so I think it's fine. But that's the other direction I think you could take this deck. I think that the rituals are always going to be the kind of constraint when you're trying to do something like that, and so I went with black just to try and get access to a little bit more mana. First day of class is in here. It's probably not good enough, but I wanted to have outs to be able to go like first day of class, Storm Scale Scion, kill you. For example, if you're able to like make enough mana, if you make 8 mana, those 2 cards just win the game. And making 8 mana is not, sounds challenging, but if you keep in mind that like if you have a cost reducer in play, like for example, like Burgi is sort of a cost reducer, right? Because you add red when you cast a spell. Ral is a cost reducer. Stormkiln Artist is a cost reducer. Primal Amulet is sort of a cost. It reduces half the cost of that combo. Ruby Medallion reduces the other half, or both halves. Sorry. So like, it's actually cheaper than it looks a non-zero amount of the time, and I think it's actually like not that crazy of an aspiration to get up to doing that. Yeah, so this is Red Black Storm. This is my last list. I really hope you enjoyed the video. This is a pretty off-the-cuff one, honestly. I wanted to get this out while the new cards were fresh, and I built most of these decks like in the last like 24 to 48 hours, so obviously there's going to be some issues. I'll make sure all the deck lists are linked below in the video description. Please let me know which one is your favorite and maybe which one you would like to see in an upcoming video. We're going to be recording this weekend. I know I'm definitely going to be playing the Storm deck, but I've got to record with some other ones too. So yeah, without further ado, please like the video, comment below, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this Tarkir Dragonstorm stuff and more Canadian Highlander content in general. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.